Sometimes you can receive a brief and it seems to be quite restrictive in what you can do, but that's only because you need to speak to the client and say, but have you thought about looking at this from a different approach, basically? We're not afraid to actually have frank conversations with clients and push them in directions, because without that, you don't get something that's going to be stand out and different. Producing another wine label in a sea of wine labels, there has to be something about that you can push and be different. We'll always put in something there that can be visually arresting and different.
Packaging design should seduce, inform, and even save the planet. I'm Hernán Braberman, and this is BRANDERMAN, the podcast where I talk with experts to uncover what it actually takes to make a positive impact on consumers, the market, and society. Warning: keep this podcast out of the reach of close-minded marketers and designers. Before the interview, let me introduce my design agency.
Brands with purpose. Human, agile, honest brands that leave no one indifferent. Tridimage creates and revitalizes brands to imagine and shape the future. Tridimage, the branding and packaging design agency for bold brands.
Today I had the pleasure to speak with Ivan Bell, Group Manager, Director and CEO at Stranger & Stranger, one of the leading firms in the field of alcoholic beverage packaging. For the past 23 years he has worked alongside Kevin Shaw, founder of Stranger & Stranger, in building the award-winning packaging consultancy. He oversees design from their locations in London, New York and San Francisco. In this episode we talk about how to create an unmistakable brand identity. Ivan also shares the keys to Stranger & Stranger creative process and explains how to find the harmony between creativity and commerciality when it comes to big established brands. Today with me, Ivan Bell. Ivan, each of us is a container of ideas, projects, and dreams. However, we can't read the label when we are inside the jar. What do you think your label says, or what would you like it to say?
I love the fact of thinking that I'm a package and what's the label say. It would have to be something to do with my roots to start off with. So I think something, a northern lad made good. What do I mean by a northern lad? Well, I'm a Geordie, so that's what they call somebody who comes from Newcastle upon Tyne, which is in the northeast of England. I'm from a very proud working class background. I was the first in my family to go to university, and that was way back in the early 1980s. I think the label would also have to say a detail person with a passion for good design, typography and storytelling. Also probably something on there would say passionate about brands that disrupt and stand out. And I think finally, as we say, stranger, don't fit in, stand out.
Building a brand is like a journey. It starts with defining where we are and asking ourselves where we want to go. What was the path that led you from studying graphic design to becoming fascinated with consumer brand packaging for alcoholic beverages?
I think it has to go back to when I was at school. I always loved art and design classes. So I had to make a choice when it came to, what your future career would be. It was a choice between obviously being creative or, I suppose, an analyst in a way. That analytical side has stayed with me, but obviously I decided to take the creative route. Went to study graphics at Norwich School of Art and Design in Norfolk, which is a 3-year BA course. Again, which I loved. I mean, those 3 years just flew by. I was very fortunate as well. At that time in the UK, you got lots of visiting lecturers. So you had lots of people that were in very famous design companies at that time that would come in and see you. So it was a great time to be a student and by all these professional designers. And actually one thing I remember, I was in awe of a presentation that was made by Marcello Manali and Brian Tattersfield of Manani Tattersfield. They had a reputation as one of the most avant-garde design agencies in London. I just loved everything they did, basically. And obviously I feel very lucky to have started my career at such a time when there were so many noteworthy design companies, at their heyday. I mean, we had Rodney Fitch, who was obviously Fitch & Co., and Terence Conran Design Group. and a young contemporary designer, a chap called Neville Brody, who's only a few years older than I am, best known for his work on The Face and Arena magazines. So that all influenced me, basically. And I think that's where I got my love of this mixture of typography and imagery and understanding how you can combine those in certain ways to tell a particular story. So I was fortunate to leave Norwich with my degree and went straight to London. Kevin Shaw, who is the founder of Stranger, and myself have known each other for many years. And I've joined Kev in the year 2000. At that time, there was just Kev and one other person, and we just started to work together. Kevin founded Stranger in 1994, so we are 28 at the moment. We'll be 30 years very soon, which again is scary because that everything feels like yesterday, feels like only a year or two ago, and it's obviously not. It's a longer period of time. When we first started, there was only 3 of us. Now we're up to 33 people, and we've still got people working for us that joined us nearly at the very beginning. We started in the UK. Kev and I would find ourselves on flights going backwards and forwards to the US for one particular client. And that's when we thought, look, it makes more sense to try and have a base over here. Now we have between London and New York, they're roughly about the same size. We've got a very small studio set up in California, or like a satellite studio. So it's a good mix, really. It's cool. But yeah, dysfunctional family. That's who we are.
And what are some of the lessons you have learned over the years in your role as CEO and managing director at Stranger?
That you wear many hats. You may well be a graphic designer at heart. You also have to become a diplomat, a politician at times, but also your mentoring capability comes out. So it's a mix of those things, basically. But I strongly believe something that's executed extremely well, a great idea, it can have a positive impact as well. So yeah, love what we do.
What aspect of your work are you proud of?
I love being able to do what we do. The creative part of, in a way, problem solving, but actually, I think out of the briefs we get, the best type of projects that I absolutely love are what we call blue sky projects. A lot of the times clients will come to us with just an idea for a liquid and come to us to look at, how do we position it? What's it going to be named? How the structure's going to look, things like that. Love those things because it allows you to use the really creative side of your brain and perhaps go off piste occasionally. And I feel like I feel like that school child drawing and doing things again. I just enjoy seeing something develop from nothing, from an idea. Absolutely love it.
Ivan, I have a magic wand here. What would you like to change about your studio right now?
I would say a cloning device on the magic wand would be good because I find that as you go through life, you come across certain people who are exceptional at what they do, a very gifted talent. And sometimes you just wish that you had perhaps 2 or 3 of them in the same vein. So if I could clone everybody that's working for us now, that would be wonderful. But my only nightmare with that would be that would double the amount of work and the pressure that we have at the moment, which I wouldn't want to do. So in a way, I'm quite happy with where we are. Thank you very much. I'm surrounded by an amazing team. Yeah. So nothing.
Stranger is renowned for solving projects with sophistication, craft, and above all, with a lot of personality and allure. What do you think are the keys to your creative process to arrive at these solutions?
We've always looked at everything from a consumer's viewpoint, and we try and do that with all the briefs that we get for design, trying to understand how a consumer would experience something and see something. Our process has always been the same, regardless of the size of client or the type of brief we get, looking at it from a consumer's viewpoint, but basically doing the research, doing your homework about whatever that brand may be. It's like try and get as much information as you can about the brand that you're working on. If it's a famous brand that's spending time in their archive with the client, you never know where a spark for what could be the design strategy that could then develop into the final packaging is going to come from. And then we always put in a process of collaboration between ourselves and the client at the very beginning, which is something we call a mood board territory. What is that mood board territory section? It's visual, but it's not packaging concepts or anything. It's a series of storyboards. So it might be setting a particular style, a theme. It's try and get the client to think outside the box and look at things with a slightly different angle, but it's also trying to get a place of comfort for the client. Because sometimes, as you know, it's the work that stranger do. I mean, sometimes we get a client saying to us, oh, come back with something that's way out there. Now, what they mean is way out there, and what stranger means is way out there. Huge difference. So that's why we use this process, because it's a way of finding where we can stretch things with that particular client. So it's trying to find a mutual area of comfort for them, basically. That's where we start designing from, basically. We never come back with hundreds of different versions of something. We try and hone in during this period of time. So there might be 3 or 4 mood board routes that we discuss with the client. From those, there'll be definitely something that influences the final brief for the packaging, and that's where we start from, which means that you're already honed down when you're coming back. So you can actually concentrate on giving them perhaps something that they feel more comfortable with, and also perhaps something that is a bit more pushing them a bit further in what they're doing. We've always approached it exactly the same way, but always, again, from having that consumer viewpoint, from bearing that at the back of your mind, what's the product got to do to make you see it on the back bar or on a shelf in a supermarket or wherever, that makes you want to go and pick it up and build this emotional connection with it. So, yeah, love what we do.
Many of your label designs are quite unusual. How do you manage to convince clients to go forward with such solutions?
I think it's a case of being very upfront and open, and actually also not afraid to challenge people's preconceptions of things. Sometimes you can receive a brief and it seems to be quite restrictive in what you can do, but that's only because you need to speak to the client and say, but have you thought about looking at this from a different approach, basically? Kev and I are both Northerners, and basically there's this phrase of what you see is what you get. So we're not afraid to actually have frank conversations with clients and push them in directions, because without that, you don't get something that's going to be stand out and different. Producing another wine label in a sea of wine labels, there has to be something about that you can push and be different. We'll always put in something there that it can be visually arresting and different to perhaps what they're expecting. But it all has to come back to the business case of why you should do this, how this is going to get the product recognized and talked about. We try and do things that are not middle of the road. It's a bit like Marmite, people are either going to love something or hate something. And we'd rather do a brand that people have that visceral reaction to. Why? Because either way of that, then the brand is getting talked about, and that's putting the brand forward so people hear the name and understand it. We always try and push things and come at it from a different angle if we can, something that perhaps the client wasn't expecting.
In your package design projects, how far does art and craft go, and where does design begin?
Art and craft are extremely important to us, and that comes down to use of materials, finishes, processes. But you also always, this is where the wearing of different hats, you always have to remember that the majority of projects you work on are consumer products, things that are being sold and people need to buy them. So you have to, in a way, challenge everything you're doing with the business hat on about, is this going to sell a product? Is this going to get noticed? But craft and the detailing of something is extremely important in everything. Having little discovery elements that you don't see at first sight, but are within the package design. So yes, extremely important. But at the end of the day, there is a part of you that has to always think business decision as well.
What do you think is the role of a bespoke bottle design in brand building?
Bespoke bottle designs are great because they give the client an opportunity to have something that is iconic and hopefully over a short period of time gets recognized as being their brand, as opposed to going along with something which is, taking an off-the-shelf bottle. And in the early days when we first started, the difference between doing a bespoke glass bottle and then perhaps decorating an off-the-shelf bottle, the cost to the client was hugely different. But over the past couple of years, with obviously supply issues, that cost differentiation isn't so big now because lots of glass companies, they no longer hold stock of bottles. So this idea of buying something from their catalog, it still has to be produced. So if you can then adjust the mold to have something that makes it more bespoke to you, then we try and push that all the time. If I can push and have a discussion with the client and explain pros against the cons of using a bespoke package, I will always try and get them to do that because it's theirs. It becomes part of their identity and part of their DNA. and will hopefully, if you're doing your job correctly, will be around for quite a period of time as well. So it's very important to have a bespoke bottle, I think, if you can push that boat out.
How would you describe an ideal stranger and stranger client?
I would say somebody with an open mind, somebody that's not afraid to make some controversial decisions on something, but also somebody who's in control of their own destiny. Only because that way you're already on the same page about doing something which is the best that you can do and creating something that is going to be so differentiated from your competitors and give you that great standout on shelf.
Designers and marketers need to realize they are not just selling products. They are telling stories through packaging. Package design is the visual expression of the brand's soul. Stranger and stranger client base is diverse, from well-known global brands to new startups. How can we find the harmony between creativity and commerciality when it comes to big established brands? Why do you think larger brands do not usually dare to do something different to the industry norm?
I think a lot of the time it comes down to a fear. They have a certain customer base that they don't want to alienate. And that is actually some of the very first conversations we sometimes have with clients about their fear of alienating existing consumer base. The real truth of the matter is that consumers don't have that long a memory when it comes to brands on shelf. And we've shown this from some of the major repacks we've done for larger brands where there's been a dramatic change. There still has to be some synergy. It still has to be recognizable as that brand somehow or other on shelf. But there's no reason why you can't do something which entirely different, perhaps an unexpected bottle shape or it's a color or something else that then immediately becomes associated with the brand. A short while after a new product has been introduced, all those things about, oh, it's different than everything else. It's like the consumer can't remember when you ask them, what was the product like before this? They've suddenly accepted it for how it looks now. Startups are a lot more adventurous when it comes to that because obviously they don't have that historical relationship. Larger brands, yes, always worry about that. You can actually give them the confidence by showing what you've done with other brands and how successful that's been to actually get them to get over that slightly and think, okay, fine, I trust you. I hear what you're saying. Go away, come back, show me where you think this can go. I always prefer to have those conversations. And actually the trust thing, that is something that is very important. I mean, there's this mutual respect and building a trust that has to happen between yourself and the client.
How can a premium brand breathe authenticity without falling back on some design trend?
There has to be some authenticity from its heritage and where it's from. You can obviously contemporize that and modernize that as you're going through, but I think you have to be very careful about not backing onto a certain trend on things. What you need to be doing is finding something to push this brand and make it stand out from the competition to be slightly different, but also at the same time respecting its heritage. You can move something forward slightly, but you always want it to be slightly timeless. The trouble is with doing something that is following a particular trend at that time, you've got to think that within, 2, 3 years, 5 years time, that trend is going to be over with and that product is going to look old. And then they're going to be back into the scenario of repacking that again. A good example for us of that is a product we did many years ago, which is Kraken Rum. We knew we had the opportunity to do something slightly different. We also knew there were trends around at the time, but there was a way of you just got to see through that and create something that is going to have a life of its own over a long period of time. It's still now on shelf. It still looks of now, even though it was of then.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. It's that thing of just being careful with what you're doing and realizing that you need to be doing something that just has a timeless effect, whatever that may be.
What sets apart a great packaging designer from a good one?
A designer that realizes that every single detail has to make sense on this, whether that be the bottle structure itself, through to the capsule, through to the label. There has to be that every single thing you're putting on there seems to have a seamless gelling, so it all works together, giving the storytelling from the structure to the graphics. I think a designer that can produce this feeling of wonderment from a consumer of, why have I not seen that before moment? You know, I think some people have it and some people don't. It's just this magic within them. It's like little creative genius, basically. Yeah, that's the difference, I think, for us anyway, from being a good designer to an exceptional designer.
What is the worst design crime you have ever seen or perhaps committed?
Okay, good question. Actually, I've said of late, I mean, I haven't committed any, but I've actually observed something of late. Funny enough, just a short period ago, I was in a global travel retail outlet at an airport. An occupational hazard for me. I always have to arrive at the airport nearly 4 or 5 hours before my flight because I know that I'm going to be spending at least 2 of those in global travel retail looking at all the packaging, seeing what's out there. I was doing that and I've seen a customer obviously very interested in a particular product, choosing what was a very expensive and heavy bottle of whiskey. The bottle had all those cues for an award-winning design. So they proceeded to pick up a pre-packaged version, so obviously a gift box version of the bottle. But somehow no one had thought about the consumer experience with this, because as the gift box was made in 2 parts, so an outer decorated sleeve and an inner decorated container, which was holding the bottle, sliding together vertically.
Wow.
And you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but without any means of sealing the 2 halves together. So consequently, this person picked it up and immediately the base of the container and the bottle dropped to the floor, smashing to the ground. Thankfully, somehow the bottle didn't break. But the crime there, it was the classic of not understanding the consumer experience. That's a crime.
Now I propose we play a brief game. As you know, a ping pong table is a must in many creative studios. So I will make you a series of brief questions and you have to choose one or another concept. And if you want, you can explain why you chose it. Are you ready for BRANDERMAN ping pong?
Okay, let's give it a try.
I am a designer or I am a consultant?
Consultant.
Close brief or blue sky brief?
Blue sky brief.
Creative strategist or strategic designer?
Strategic designer.
A creation project or a redesign project?
Now, can I have both?
Yeah, I will allow one that's both.
Okay.
Focus groups or gut feelings?
Gut feelings every time.
Mass market or premium market?
Premium, actually.
Have you ever designed something for fast-moving consumer goods?
Yes, I have. I've been through that. Obviously, in my early days as a new designer and getting into packaging design, I did all that. Beef burger packets 1 minute, hair product packets the next, everything else. But I've seen the light. I decided to specialize in what we're doing with drinks packaging.
Big established brand or niche emerging brand?
Okay, you've already given me one of these where I could have both, so I suppose I need to choose. But I would prefer both because I just find you have different opportunities. When you have something that is entirely new and niche, you can be more outrageous and do things that an established client perhaps you're weary of doing. But the other thing I love doing is being able to push things with an established brand, getting the client to be receptive to a different approach and perhaps one that's going to be beneficial to the brand in the long run. So I love both, basically.
Conceptualization or execution?
They're both extremely important, but concept, because at concept, there's no limitations really. So, yeah.
Label design or bottle design?
That's unfair. Love both. Structural, actually, I think bottle design, because it's about pushing and doing the best you can with the process. I love being able to do things that people say, oh, that's impossible. You can't do that. But yes, you can.
Forms follow function or forms follow emotion?
Consumers buy things on an emotional level. I mean, that's why you and I walk away with something off a shelf after we've seen something. You don't understand really what the connection is, but there is this emotional connection. So I think, yes, emotional. Yeah.
Leading designers or continuing to design all your life?
I would love to continue to design all your life, basically. Even though running a company now, I still do get to do that. I mean, design influences everything I do on a daily basis, both at work and not at work. As you do, my friend. It's in your DNA. Yeah. I can't help not doing that. So, yeah.
Remote work or face-to-face work?
Now, that's interesting because obviously over the last couple of years, we've all been working from home because of lockdowns and everything else. If you had said to Kevin and myself, say 5 years ago, that the majority of our design team were all going to be remote working over a period of time, we would have said, no way, but I don't see how that's going to work. We were proven wrong. I mean, it has worked. However, I still feel it's important that you are doing face-to-face at some stage. When you're in a creative environment in the studio, it's those off-the-cuff conversations and comments that lead somewhere and pick up on something. You can't do that working remotely. It doesn't matter how many Zoom calls you have. It just doesn't work the same way.
And finally, great designers are born or great designers are made?
I think great designers can be made to an extent, but really great designers are born. It's within your DNA. If you're meant to be, you're meant to be.
We all know that alcoholic drinks are a carbon-heavy category. How are the rules of designs changing as consumers become increasingly concerned about the environmental footprint of packaging?
Your job as a packaging designer has some added functions now as well. You're very much an influencer now. You're very much in the position where you can educate your client. We owe it to the planet and we owe it to ourselves, basically. A good packaging designer is one thing, but you do have this extra function to you now as well, so you're not just a creative. You need to be a realist. You also have to have that mix of a business head and creative head, so which suppliers would be best suited to a client's sustainability needs so that you can bring them into a conversation with the client at an earlier stage, acting as a matchmaker, I suppose, as well. We all need to do our bit to save this wonderful planet, if not for our generation, for the next generations to follow.
What do you predict will emerge in the alcoholic drink pack design space in 10, 20 years from now? And how do you imagine the term package design will evolve?
I still think, in a way, glass is still going to be around in some form or other. But I think there are definitely going to be other packaging substrates that haven't even been born yet that we're going to be using and seeing. Regardless of whatever happens, there's still going to be a need for good packaging designers to be designing in whatever these materials and technologies are. So I don't think our job is going to vanish.
How can brands future-proof their identity when brick and mortar is being replaced by e-commerce?
We're designing packaging, then more and more we've got to think about what are the digital assets for the off-pack, what can be taken from the pack and then becomes something that the brand can own, and the ownership of that and the space in which it appears.
If you could just take a pill and learn any subject, anything, what would it be?
The one thing that I was extremely poor at school, and so one thing I regret not paying more attention to, was languages and being able to converse in more than one language. So that's the one thing I would love. I would love to just be able to take a pill and suddenly wake up the next morning speaking fluent Spanish or fluent French or fluent Portuguese, just something like that. That would be great, without all the pain.
Ivan, what is the most important thing on your to-do list for your professional life? What is your next adventure?
Apart from obviously continuing to work with the amazing clients that we have at the moment on a daily basis, and also allowing us to do what we do best, which is creating award-winning packaging, which I love, I'd like to do what happened to me. I'd like to inspire the next generation of designers, just like Manali Tattersfield inspired me all those years ago. So who knows? Watch this space. See what happens.
It's actually happening. You should know.
Well, you tell me, but yeah, I know. Exactly. We still think ourselves as just a couple of northern lads just designing. It always amazes me every day. I mean, I just love what we're doing, but I feel privileged to be able to work for the people we work for and do the things we do. So I'm also in a job as well that I love. I mean, I don't see this as a job. I just love what I do. I'm a designer in my DNA. And as long as I'm able to do it, that's what I'll do.
Ivan, thanks for this sparkling conversation. As your agency motto says, you don't fit in, you stand out. Cheers.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, my friend. Thank you. Wonderful to talk to you. Hope to see you soon.
I hope you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. You can check the episode notes for all the relevant links. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram and on my website, branderman.design. Follow the podcast in your favorite app so you don't miss the next episode of Branderman. the podcast where we try to uncover how to make a positive impact on consumers, the market, and society through package design.